Very loud.
Hello, everybody. This is Luis Rodriguez, co-founder of Tia Chucha Centro Cultural and Bookstore, and we're very honored here to present a very important presentation that we're calling Poets, Rememories, Community, and Saints. We have two and very important Chicano writers and scholars that we're honored to have here. And so I want to just say, first of all, if you love what we're doing, please donate if you can. We're at tiachucha.org/donate. Please give us money whenever you can, because this is what keeps things going. We've got a beautiful space and we have a lot of events. I mean, I would say a couple hundred events a year that we do. And this is one of them where we present important writers. The importance of this is, of course, the dialogue and the poetry reading. It's going to be poetry. And I want to introduce the people that are going to be a part of this, starting with Alejandro Morales, who's here on my right. And he's going to read from Zapote Tree, his book, Poetry. And here's, I will say about Alejandro. He's the son of Mexican immigrants born in Montebello, California. He earned his PhD from Rutgers University. He is a professor emeritus in the Department of Chicano Latino Studies at the University of California, Irvine. Recognized by many as a pioneer of Chicano Latino literature, he writes in Spanish and English. He has authored several historical biographies in which he tells the fictional story of a character's life using historical personages and events, bringing together his love for both history and writing. His works are examples of Miguel de Unamuno's idea of intra-history, writing about the significance of the lives of ordinary people, of Linda Huchian's theory of historiographic metafiction, the practice of writing aware of theory, history, and fiction as strategies to rethink and reevaluate the past, and Irving Stone's practice of writing biographical novels. His research explores a variety of topics that concern the Chicano Latino community, including history, immigration, race relations, ethnicity, family, labor, education, religion, memory, gender, power, borderlands, and the fantastic. Recipient of the Luis Leo Liel Award for Distinction in Chicano Latino Literature, Morales was recognized for his contributions for Chicano Latino literature and his accomplishments as a major American writer. And I have to add that Tia Chucha Press, the press here at Tia Chucha's, is honored to present his novel. It will be Tia Chucha's first novel that we've ever published, and we're honored that we've done. It's called The Place of the White Heron. That should be out this fall, around October 15th. So please look out for that. We have a section on our website, tiachucha.org/Tia Chucha Press. I think you can find it where you can know more about it. But you also have a bookstore online that you can order his book, or pre-order it, because we're getting pre-orders now. If you get a chance, please pre-order. The other important great writer that we're having here who will also read poetry is Juan Casillas Nunez. He has a PhD in Hispanic Literatures from UC Santa Barbara. He is the author of Estrategias Filosóficas y Literarias de Estela Portillo Trambly with Francisco A. Nomeli. He co-edited Chicano Sketches, short stories by Mario Suarez. His creative writing has been published in the following literary journals: Ventana Abierta, Enclave, Camino Real, and Sibila, among others. Currently, he is a professor of Spanish at Santa Barbara City College, where he teaches language, culture, and literature courses. And just so you know, after the reading, each will have time to read their poetry. Then me and Margarita Lopez will sit right next to them, and we're going to have a conversation, a dialogue between us four. So I want to introduce Margarita. She is a retired professor of literature and social linguistics. She has presented and published nationally and internationally on Mexican, Chicanx, and border literature and film, as well as creative writing. One of her greatest rewards as a professor has been working with students and the community in literary creative expression and writing. Currently, she is co-authoring the Spanish-English poetry anthology titled Sisters, which includes women authors from diverse ethnic and linguistic backgrounds from the United States, Latin America, and Spain. So without further ado, let me introduce now the poets Alejandro Morales and Juan Casillas Nunez. Thank you.
just keep picking it up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not the one uses.
No, I'll be picking that up. I'd rather not. Well, thank you for having me. Really, it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for announcing my new book, Place of the White Heron. It's a book that it's actually part of a series of books. The first part of that series would be Waiting to Happen, that was published already. And maybe someday I'll be able to publish it when it's, again, republish it for the 25th anniversary of the book. And then The Place of the White Heron is the second book of that series, and then we'll have a third book, which is way in the future, because I also work a lot with futurism, science of all kinds, and so forth. And I also work a lot with the U.S.-Mexico trans-border region, which I think is going to be very important for the future. I want to read some poems today that are really some of my very first poems. I've been writing poetry ever since I started to write short stories and novels, and that's a long time ago, right? But these are what I call rememories, and that's the term that I use. But also it's a term that the author of Beloved, Toni Morrison, has used to explain the character of Beloved. Some of you probably have read the novel and so forth. I'm not going to tell you about it; it'll probably take too much time. But nonetheless, I want to kind of in a little time explain what rememory is, according to her. Which I like that idea, and I use that idea, and I've also used the same idea in other in novels and so forth. Rememory, well, we all have memories, right? I mean, we have a whole up in our brain. We have so many memories, right? But some of those memories stay with us, and they don't want to let go, all right? And they're more powerful than the simple memories that we have up here. And the memory can be a memory of a horrible thing, a tragic thing, which was the case in Beloved, right, the novel. Or a memory could be a beautiful event in your life. And that's what I want to read. I want to read poems that are rememories, that are what I consider to be rememories in my life. And they have a lot to do with my family, my barrio, Simon's barrio, where I grew up in South Montebello, the brickyard that my father worked for years and years and years, and my family. And we lived in the company town. Also, I attended the Mexican school in Simon's, because we were completely segregated back then. So these are family reactions to that rememory that always kind of hangs around, right? Every time I drive by my old neighborhood and I see my house and so forth, I have those rememories hit me. They never go away, according to Toni Morrison. They are always there. It's a place that something happened to a particular person, etc. The first one is titled Zapote Tree. Zapote Tree, Sweetest Memory. And it kind of explains why I named this the title, why I used the title Zapote Tree. And it goes something like this. When I was very young, in the late afternoon, the house became quiet. After finishing her morning chores, Mother lay down to rest. I climbed into her eager for her to spoon me, and cuddled me close to her warmth. Estate quieto, oye, escucha los pajaritos. I followed her finger, pointing beyond the window to the giant zapote tree. With thousands of singing birds, I listened to chirping in the tree. Her embrace, warm and safe, I was happy. I concentrated on the birds, singing to her beating heart. In her immense calmness, I always fell asleep. But the sweetest memory of her plays on. Another rememory is it's about a kind of my very first advisor, other than my father, my brothers, and my sisters, and my mom. And he was a very old man, and he lived for a while. After his family died, he lived in that same house. But then somebody kind of brought him in and started taking care of this fellow, right? And I remember when my dad were walking by this one store that was open Don Concha's store, he was always sitting there, always reading a book, and I would let go and I would go sit down next to the compadrito and he would show me the book he was reading, etc., and tell me what it was all about. So he was the first one to introduce me really to books in a sense, right? Other than me, I was 3 or 4 years old at the time, and he gave me good advice that I have never forgotten. Okay, and this advice is the following. First, I'll kind of describe it. I let go of my father's hand and walked over to see the old man reading on a bench in front of Don Costa's grocery store. El compadrito who always provided wise counsel. I listened, and even today I hear el compadrito. No temes de la noche, porque la luz de un nuevo sol te brillará en la frente, y con la navaja rota forjarás la espada del valiente. Have no fear on the night because the light in a new sun will shine on you, on your forehead, and with the broken blade you will forge the sword of the brave. Then I want to read something that is not exactly a rememory, but it was an experience that I had when I was in graduate school at Rutgers. I was studying with a professor who was a medievalist, and at that time I thought I was going to be a medievalist, right? Until Rhoda and I, my wife Rhoda is right over there, she put up with me for 56 years. So we invited Professor Armstead, that was a professor, to dinner, right? And I had told them and so forth that I wanted to be a medievalist, to explore all these medieval texts and so forth. That's the way he did. I was fascinated by that, the discussions that we had with him. But he said, no, you shouldn't be a medievalist. You should study this new literature, right? And he showed me Anaya's novel, right? This is what you got to really write about. And that became my dissertation. I said, forget the medieval business and simply study, Latin American literature and Chicano literature. That was the word that was used to describe this particular literature. But I was in a class with also another professor, and we were studying Cervantes. We were studying all the classical writers of Spain, and I thought to myself, well, what if Cervantes? What if somebody back then would tell Cervantes that they would render his novel, El Quixote, down to verses? How would he respond, right? My belief is that anything that's written could become a poem. Forgive me for saying that, but I think that is the case, okay? Now, this is called Defend the Story After Cervantes. On a sacred mountain at the precise holy center where my flesh joined the asymptote, an apparition approached to champion a story. My life, a massive novel for centuries bound in tight leather wrappings, the narrative episodes of my life, gifts to you who dare shred to verses the sentences of my human toil, villains, apocryphal scholars, you who know so much, once again attempt to recount human existence, to please yourselves, to gain the right of ignorant nobles. I garner rich blessings from prelates of the Holy Church. You assert that a life like mine could be rendered in verse to be epic, you claim. Sentences in poetic form are to support the measures of my days. The specter unsheathed a sword, swung it defiantly, and vanished into time. Now I'm going to read another particular poem that is kind of a rememory to me, because the person in this poem, and this is based on a person that we know, and we've been related to her family for many, 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 actually generations of people who have worked with us and so forth. And this poem is called Frida, and most of you know who Frida Kahlo is, right? But this case is a little bit different kind of Frida. So Frida, you can worship Frida, put her on a pedestal, dress like her, tattoo her on your body. I idolize nobody. I acknowledge the Mexican and Central American working woman sitting on the bus bench at 5 in the morning. She cleans her house, your house. She mends your expensive department store clothes. She takes care of your child or your parents. I praise the Mexican and Central American woman. She waits at 6:30 in the afternoon for bus number 67. I smile at her tired face. She nods to sleep during the long ride to the corner in Santa Ana, where she gets off to walk to her sister's apartment. I offer admiration to the woman. She survives low pay, dirty words, pawing at her body, lustful looks, racist opinions, ugly gestures, empty nights, heartfelt loneliness. She is not afraid of you. Ella es una entre miles de mujeres ninguneadas by cruel, abusive women who smiling command the impunity to keep her docile maid in place. She is the unseen, unrecognized, crucial link to your economic backbone that you lean against in the seat of your luxury vehicle. Not afraid of you, no se raja from her tumultuous and burning dreams. She rises again, never entirely rested, looks you in the eye, carves your mind, and reminds you of the terror, of your terror of her leaving. So, now I also want to read a little bit about my mom. You know, and these are things that actually happened. These are again the whole idea of when you drive by this particular restaurant, that event, that my experiences with her at this particular restaurant is always there. And it always wakes up, right? And Mexicano, et cetera, et cetera. My mom came about 1912, right? And same thing happened with her. Her and her family crossed the border, and they got a green card right away. So they were legal in the United States, but my dad never got a passport. So, and nor did my mother, right? No. And this is called Mother Lost Her Green Card. She is 89 years old, has been in the United States since 1912. I sent a letter to Immigration Services explaining the situation. Mother lost her green card, but the INS never responded. I worried that the INS would question her request for a new MICA, require her to return to Mexico to reapply for entry to the United States, a trip she wouldn't survive. I dreaded to think that ICE could send its home invader team, handcuff this fragile woman, take her to the border and on to Guanajuato. Even at work, breaking down, repairing, and reassembling diesel engines, I worried about her. Thank God it never happened. It took over a year from the day she joined Father at Rose Hills for me to take flowers to my parents' gravesite. Almost 2 years after Mother's passing, I received a form from Immigration Services declaring that Mother was not eligible. The reason why? For a United States, she wasn't eligible for a United States green card. I moved down the form to the section labeled reason. The reason was the applicant is a citizen. How and when did she ever get a green card? She never spoke about going to meetings and so forth, right? But she had a gang. She had a gang of women, friends, dear friends, and they would go everywhere. Right? They'd go to parties or other people to eat, other people's places to eat and so forth. And she one day said, no, I'm taking classes now, but I had no idea what classes they were. I never thought they were going to be immigration classes, right? And that's the truth. Right? She went to these classes, and they all got dressed one day, and I was there. I used to visit her after my dad died. I would go probably at least once a week or once every 2 weeks, but I was out there, right? And she's all dressed up, and then here come the ladies and to pick her up, and they went, right? And that's how she got the green card. She went, and that was the day she went to for the test. And you raise your hand there, et cetera, et cetera. Some mother got a green card. She died a citizen of the United States. All right, a few more little poems. You raise your hand if I'm going too long. This one happens to be about a friend of mine from high school, and I kept in touch with a lot of my high school buddies. I never really, I went to East LA Community College, and then I went down to Cal State LA, and then eventually Rutgers, and Rutgers is in New Jersey. So, but I never really held on to friends from those universities or so, but a lot of buddies from high school. And this is to my classmate, and this guy has always argued, he's always saying he's going to retire. He's as old as I am. I'm 79. He's about 80, right? He keeps saying he's going to retire. He's a criminal lawyer, right? And he's dedicated all his life, all his career to helping, people who've been in bad trouble. He, in fact, the side to mention here is that we had a real good friend, but his name was Leroy. That was his first name, and he was a nutty guy. He loved fast cars. He would fix up these cars and so forth. But he eventually went on to USC. He went to USC medical school, and he became a doctor. But then he hit some hard times. He was one of the very first ones to develop emergency medicine in hospitals and so forth. But Larry defended him, and I won't tell you what he did, but he ended up 20 years in some of the really hardcore prisons of California. And he wasn't a vicious man, but he ended up in the wrong prisons, right? But anyway, and this is just an example of the type of work that this man does. To my classmate Larry, on the reality of it all, for Larry Forbes, Esquire. In a year or less, you wanted to retire, but the path of deferral has become darker, harsher, until bitterly you recognize it's too late. Years of equivocation, still too busy to pick a date. In October, I'll be 75, like you, entering Ruquitohood. I did the numbers, hoping for at least 15 more años de buena salud. Embrace our generation. Brain decline, physical decay, the marching years take their toil. Take a closer look. Reunion smaller, the departure list longer. How many more desperate defenses will you undertake in a few more trials? Left on your year's docket before you recognize the deadly reality of it all. Here's another one, kind of a situation that I kind of heard about. The issue of gun violence or guns just about everywhere nowadays is really it's a horrible thing. People being killed daily. Hundreds of people are being shot with weapons, and this is about a professor who looks out of his window, out his third floor window, onto the parking lot behind the library. Library parking lot, see something, say something. Through my third floor office window, at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. A tree full with green leaves, not a giant among trees, dresses a dark, thick trunk, stands out beneath 2 pines and willows. A yellow fire hydrant, a brown trash can, a white folding chair, 3 automobiles parked in the back of the library, the black asphalt made up with blue and white stripes. A young man rushes to a car, opens the back door, reaches for his jacket, bats down the pockets, tosses it violently back. Desperately opens the trunk, tosses 2 books, a sweater, a green folder, dark glasses, opens a black box, caresses a gun in his hand, jams in a clip, cuddles the weapon against his heart. Carringly places the firearm in his back pocket, calmly lowers the door, excited now, looks up smiling emphatically, starts to slow walk toward the student center, sure of himself. And a couple more.
Yeah, good. Take your time.
All right. I want to read another one here. It's called La Pinca's Monologue. And this is a story, or this is I believe all poetry tells a story. This is a story of a character. Let me tell you a story real quick. A kid I grew up with developed a condition, physical condition, that was, and it's actually a condition that is still in existence, but he developed like tumors all over his body, tumors all over his body and so on. And they tried to treat him, but it didn't help. And later on, he got him in his face, and the kids jumping on a bus in Simons. At this time, we were already segregated into Montevallo Unified School District, and we jump on the bus. And so there were a couple of guys who were really kind of aggressive people, and they would look at him, and they would tease him, and he had these things again, kind of poking out here and there and so forth. And one guy yelled at him and says, "Hey, cara de nopal," they called him. And he said, "Penca." And they started calling him Penca because of his face and these things that come out of his body. Well, he went on to become a painter. And he went to Stanford, and he graduated in their art programs and so on. And his woman came to see, the artist showing their an exhibit showing that Stanford showing their paintings, and this woman really liked the La Penca, if you could call it, I would call it that. They liked that art, and so what they did is they took what she did is talk to him and say, "Look, you're graduating, right? I want to set you up." This woman was a wealthy woman. And she says, "I want to wake you up in Palo Alto, and I'm going to find a space where you can work, you can paint, you can hopefully, and also we'll have a space that has a second floor, so that's where you'll live, but you'll have, you will always show your paintings. You have a place to show your paintings. And I think they're going to sell." And that's exactly what happened. And then she had a daughter, right, a real pretty woman, and she had her help him out by taking care of the store, taking care of the books, et cetera, et cetera. One night, he comes home and he sees her, embraced by one of the football players. That was actually her boyfriend. She kissed him and so forth. And he really felt horrible because he liked that woman also. He went upstairs. She said, "I'm going to lock up." He went upstairs, and and also what he did was he made beautiful paintings, very, very much original paintings, right? But very alike the traditional painting of the Virgen de Guadalupe. So he was so mad that he drank some booze and so forth, and he became, really quite angry, and he started taking the images of the Virgen and ripping them up and throwing them on the floor, and he threw paint all over them. And finally, he passed out, and he landed on all these paintings on the weekend with all that paint. The next morning, he gets up, and goes to the bathroom, cleans himself up, right, and looks down, and he sees this one painting of the Virgin completely covered with all sorts of colors. All sorts of colors. And he says, my God, this is pretty interesting. So he waited, it was all oil, so it was okay. And then by then he heard his helper, the girl, to come open the door and open the store. He went downstairs, he shows the painting, right, to her and says, oh, that's magnificent, my goodness. Let's put it up, even if it's a little wet, let's put it up and put a price tag on it. And we said, what am I going to sell it for? Put $500 on it. And sure enough, several people walked by and the painting sold. So he started from that point on, right? He started with his body, with all these horrible thorns on his body, he was stripped naked. He had painted more images of the vegan in natural state, right? And then he would fall and on top of her and just all over, create these magnificent paintings that became very, very, very expensive. And he sold them, right? And by that time, he got a MacArthur Fellowship. Now, about a year later, right, there's these people coming and going to his studio, and they're complaining. They're calling you desecrated the Virgen, you did this, or they're calling him all sorts of names. They were infuriated for what he had been doing all this time, because they scraped the oil, and underneath there was the image of Guadalupe. And this is him being interviewed by Barbara Wawa. What was her name again? Barbara Walters on television. And so she became a famous fellow, right? Made a lot of money, and so La Pencas Manila. The thousands out there protesting my gallery, condemning my paintings, see me as a desecrator of all that is holy, a manifestation of the devil, a disfigured monster. The bony tumors on my head, face, and body repulse you. They only know me as the grotesque artist who uses his naked body with 1,000 blunt thorns to paint over images of La Virgen de Guadalupe. Images of a liberated virgin who loves me as I love God's creation. Blessed, I will not stop covering, painting her with my body. I paint because my loved one commands it. She is my goddess, my salvation. I must fulfill her desires. I have dedicated my life, my art to La Virgen de Guadalupe. No one can ban this sacred relationship. Nobody can take her gift away from me. I love her. She is unconditional love. Thanks.
I am going to use this only so you guys can hear me. Actually, can I use that one, Alejandro?
Yeah, you want to see it?
Do you mind or just?
No.
Yeah. Okay. Let's switch. Right. Perfect. Awesome. This way I don't have to hold it. If I'm too loud, just let me know and I'll stay away from it or something. But thank you so much. I have first to give thanks to everyone here, starting with Alejandro and Luis. He knows it. Luis doesn't know it. These guys are my literary heroes, right? And to be up here to have this space for me it's truly an honor. He tells me, no, but he has to hear it, and people have to hear it, because without them, other young, not so much in age, but in books, we wouldn't have that space. We wouldn't have that inspiration. We wouldn't have all these books to look up to. So de veras, Alejandro, Luis, thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. A la profesora Margarita también, she got us organized, and yes, and then she did a schedule for us. Así que muchas gracias. I'm going to be reading today from not my first book, but my first book of creative writing. And this one is a combination of narrative, prose, and also poetry. And it's Santo Toribio Confesiones. Why write about a saint? Well, sometimes B. Traven said, hay que vivir antes de escribir. And sometimes you write about what you know, but sometimes it's awesome to write about what you don't know, or what you can never be. I can never be a saint, so that's a challenge. How would a saint think? What would he do? How would he express himself? And so this is Santo Toribio. There are various Santo Toribios, but this one happens to be the one from Jalisco, from the state of Jalisco in Mexico, and he was a martyr. If you notice the image, this is from a very famous painter, Jose Vasconcelos, and it's a cross with an intertwined serpent. I couldn't use his because of the rights of the artist, so I had this one commissioned. For Jose Clemente Orozco, this is a combination of European, right, the cross, and the actual serpent, our heritage, our ancestors of Mexico, So combined, it's that. Here, it does mean that, but it also means the struggle between two powers. Catholicism, of course, and also the Mexican government. And so right there, it's during the Cristero War. And there were two powerful entities, the church and, the Mexican government, trying to win over the people. And the church was a terrateniente. They were very powerful landowners, and they exerted power through the pulpit. They basically told believers what to do, what to say, and sometimes it was against the government. The government retaliated by passing laws that were against the church. One of them being not able to celebrate Mass. Santo Toribio was one of those rebel priests that went ahead and celebrated Mass, and for that he lost his life. So he became a martyr. Now, why is he relevant today? The reason he's relevant today is because when a lot of immigrants from Mexico and from Central America, they're crossing the border, and they're basically going to die in the desert. They find this man with the profile that is tall, güero, ojos azules, and he helps them cross. Get some water, food, and sometimes even land a job. And the only thing he tells them, okay, when you go back, go back to Mexico or go back to Central America, you need to stop in Santana de Guadalupe and give basically God thanks. When they go back, they find a painting or a statue of that man that helped them cross. And that's when they realized that it was this saint from the Cristero War that helped them out. So that's why he's become relevant for our contemporary time. So much that in 2000, Juan Pablo II is also a saint. Made him a saint. And so, how am I going to introduce this saint to others? At first I thought, okay, I'm going to write a historical introduction. I go, that's too boring. So the one who introduces this saint is a dreamer, and documented student introduces him. And this is what I'm going to read. So the first part is narrative. And then So I contextualize it because I actually write in, well, at least this one is in Spanish. But at least you know what I'm reading about. So, ¿estarías dispuesto a dejarlo todo por amor? ¿A salir de la comunidad de tu hogar y enfrentar los peligros de la guerra? En concreto, ¿a dar tu vida por lo que crees? Eso es exactamente lo que hizo Santo Toribio por amor a Dios. Entregó su vida a sus prójimos y se convirtió en mártir y santo de la Iglesia Católica. Sin embargo, estas no fueron las preguntas que me hice cuando supe quién era mi mamá. A ella no le gusta que le diga madre. Dice que esta palabra es demasiado fría y seca. Lo introdujo en mi vida y yo lo pasé por alto, lo desprecié. Vivía en la residencia estudiantil cerca de la universidad. Visitaba a mi familia cada mes. Cuando partía de mi casa a la universidad, mi mamá insistía en darme la bendición, the blessing. No sé si era que mis convicciones habían cambiado por la influencia de mis estudios o porque me sentía restringido por los mandamientos de la Iglesia Católica para hacer lo que quería. Lo cierto es que dejé de ir a misa y hasta de rezar. Por amor y respeto, aunque mi mamá sabía exactamente lo que estaba pasando, le seguía la corriente en este ritual que significaba mucho para ella. Mi mamá se sentaba en una silla y yo me ponía de rodillas enfrente de ella, hacía una serie de rezos y terminaba con Alma de Cristo. Tengo que admitir que esta oración siempre, incluso en mis periodos de ateo, me hacía sentir una paz y serenidad que hasta hoy en día no puedo comprender ni explicar. Pero esa vez, después del Alma de Cristo, finalizó con una oración. Santo Toribio, patrón de los inmigrantes e indocumentados, por favor intercede ante mi Señor Jesucristo por mi hijo Nati, para que termine sus estudios, logre una carrera y se quede en este país y después me persignó. So that's how I introduce it, with the blessing of a mother and a prayer of a mother. But then I switch it, a little bit in prose. This is Nati, right? This is I don't even figure in this poetry. So this is the dreamer. This is him speaking now. Me puse de pie y le dije con sarcasmo, ¿ya se inventó otro santo la Iglesia Católica? Ella me contestó muy enojada, ¿ya se te olvidó que somos indocumentados, que por milagro de Dios estás en la universidad? Mijito, no cabe duda que para pendejo no se estudia. Te vas a la universidad para aprender, pero se te está olvidando lo más importante, Dios. Quería gritarle, no es un milagro de Dios. Me aceptaron en la universidad, de hecho becado, debido a mi rendimiento académico y el activismo de muchas personas que luchan por tantos dreamers como yo. Pero me tragué mis palabras. Mi mamá era la persona que más se sacrificó para que yo pudiera estudiar, trabajando, mejor dicho, partiéndose el alma, de sol a sol en los campos agrícolas de California. No me sentía mal por lo que había dicho. Después de todo, ella misma me enseñó a defender mis creencias, sino porque la había lastimado. And of course, I'm going to skip a lot. But, para terminar esto de la introducción, le voy a unas cuantas páginas. keeps on meeting Santo Toribio in different places. And the funeral of his grandmother, he finds a little imagen de Santo Toribio. And his other grandma, he has a statue. And one night, he has a friends with benefits. And he's going to, he thinks he's going to get some action, right? But there's a little stamp also of Santo Toribio. And the girl says, I can't do it. Why? I can't do it. Look, his blue eyes say, look at that. I can't perform. So he starts to hate Santo Toribio because he starts to find him everywhere, right? And he thinks, okay, that's it, no more, right? I don't want to deal with this Santo Toribio. But here's the last encounter. El padre Toribio tuvo que salir abruptamente, décadas más tarde, al finalizar el siglo XX, en medio del odio, ideología y medidas anti-emigrantes de los Estados Unidos, vuelve a aparecer Santo Toribio en defensa de los menos afortunados. En este caso, aboga por los indocumentados que cruzan la frontera en busca de una mejor vida. En la iglesia se conoce como el patrón de los inmigrantes, al que popularmente llaman Padre Pollero o Santo Coyote. Son numerosos los testimonios de su intercesión. Aunque difieren un poco en los detalles, todos relatan cómo Santo Toribio los auxilió en su travesía fronteriza, proveyendo agua, comida, dinero y a veces hasta empleo. A cambio solamente pedía que fueran a la iglesia de Santana de Guadalupe a dar gracias a Dios. Cuando cumplían su palabra y veían la imagen del Padre Toribio, era cuando se daban cuenta de que un mártir los había socorrido con su milagro. Para muchos inmigrantes que lo veneraban, su canonización por el antiguo Papa, ahora conocido como San Juan Pablo II, el 21 de mayo de 2000, fue una gran bendición. So, he's a saint from this century. Ahora tenían oficialmente su santo patrono que intercedía por ellos ante Dios en sus estragos terrenales. Aquí concluye mi investigación. Remember, this is not me. This is still the dreamer. No se convirtió en santo de mi devoción, pero nunca más volví a ser irreverente con él. Un hombre que da la vida por Dios y sus prójimos merece respeto. Cuando pensé que Santo Toribio había desaparecido de mi vida, llegó a mis manos una libreta con algunos textos suyos, no de una manera misteriosa, mucho menos milagrosa, pero sí muy peculiar. Mi tío político y padrino de bautismo, Gregorio Ramírez González, pariente lejano de Santo Toribio, heredó una parcela que había pertenecido a la familia Romo González. Familia Romo González, that's the family of Santo Toribio. Dicho terreno tenía un ojo de agua, del cual algunos habitantes de la ranchería bebían porque aseguraban que era medicinal. Por su relación con Santo Toribio, mi padrino encontró en esta propiedad un manuscrito de Santo Toribio con el título Confesiones de un confesor, escondido cerca del ojo de agua, dándome preferencia por encima de sus propios hijos y otros sobrinos. Se lo regaló porque sabía que me apasionaban las letras. So this is not the trying to get rid of Santo Toribio. What does his godfather do? He gives him, a notebook with this poetry. And now he's, kind of forced to read his poetry. And he does. Este cuaderno contenía una veintena de poemas o confesiones. So they're called confessions. Santo Toribio calls them confessions. como Santo Toribio frecuentemente los llamaba. Todos, salvo el último, Santo Coyote, son de su puño y letra y tratan de lo más complejo, sublime, profundo y misterioso de la vida: Dios. Al principio me chocaba lo que consideraba un estilo simplista, pero después me di cuenta de que esa sencillez es la de Dios y que Santo Toribio intentaba emularla en su vida y sus versos. Por consiguiente, su estilo, que conllevaba versificación, metáforas, imágenes y simbolismos, es claro y directo. No quiere complicar lo que en sí ya es complejo, sino hacerlo accesible a todos. Sus confesiones se pueden entender como una conversación íntima consigo mismo, un amigo, Dios o todos a la vez. Son sus experiencias místicas, milagrosas y amorosas que quiere confesar y compartir con todo el mundo. Son sus vivencias con el Dios del amor, que con todo su anhelo quiere que otros también experimenten. Sus confesiones han impactado mi vida y por eso las pongo a disposición de los que deseen aprender de esta sacra poesía. So the one introducing the poems is this little dreamer. And here are the poems. So in a way, he's given them to us. This is the first poem. Also another, well, not the first poem, but the first poem I'm going to read. I'm only going to read 3, so don't worry. Oh, you're going to read the entire book? No. 3. I have like a little paragraph, and then that introduces the poem, and then I go into the poem. So, su amor es, his love is. Just before I read it, with the exception of the first one, it's kind of chronological. The first one should be the last poem, but it's a first poem, is where he really tells you this is what I believe and how I believe. I'm not going to read that poem. But they follow chronological, since he was a little kid and then goes into the seminar and then becomes a priest, and as a priest he goes through all these struggles. But this is one of them. And he's a little boy. Su amor es, his love is. Antes de entrar al seminario, no recuerdo qué edad tenía. En una noche calurosa me levanté a tomar agua y escuché los jadeos de mis padres. Pensé que estaban enfermos y lentamente entreabrí la puerta de su dormitorio. Sin que ellos me vieran, los vi haciendo el amor. A la mañana siguiente le pregunté a mi hermana Kika, que es mayor que él, ¿así es el amor de Dios? Entonces, because the book is titled Santo Toribio Confesiones, they're not only his confessions of the saint, but confessions of other people that are around him. And this is one of the first confessions. Así es el amor de Dios. And this is Kika's response to him. Ella contestó. Remember, for him, he's a little inquisitive boy. He's asking himself a lot of these questions. And so he loves his parents. They're making love, right? They're making this noise. That's the love of God. No. The sister says, no. Ella contestó, no. Su amor es santo, puro, humilde, dulce, repleto de bondad, sabiduría, paciencia, eternamente persistente, amable, embriagante, indestructible, es poder y debilidad que se tiene que vivir. That's the first poem. So, el amor es. When he says he's a saint, then people come to confess him, to confess to him. In this particular case, it's a prostitute. I don't say a prostitute here, but I make it obvious with the language. And then she stops coming to confession. And then eventually she comes back. But instead of confessing, like, she can't. She's so emotional, she can't say anything. She brings her confession in writing. And that's another poem. So, a Dios le gusta mi alma. So, God likes my soul. Por un tiempo, una mujer venía a confesarse conmigo todos los jueves. El pueblo no dudaba de mí, pero algunos santurrones cuestionaban las intenciones de ella. Era indudablemente bella. Su peinado, maquillaje y ropa delataban cuál era su profesión. Siempre confesaba los mismos pecados y yo le daba la absolución, pero me sentía mal porque no sabía cómo ayudarla a salir de esa vida. Más por desesperación que iluminación le regalé unas oraciones de Santa Teresa del Niño Jesús. La mujer dejó de confesarse por un tiempo y cuando regresó no podía hablar de la emoción y a manera de confesión me dio los siguientes renglones. And this is her confession, right, in the form of a poem. A Dios le gusta mi alma. No comprendo por qué, pues yo soy una mera basura, una vil porquería. Mi espíritu era como la letrina de un burdel que estaba embarrado de mierda y vómito por doquier. Pero a Dios le gusta, a Dios le importa mi alma. Yo le decía, mi Señor, por favor no entres. Mira que te vas a ensuciar. Pero no pude resistir su seducción divina y le abrí las puertas. Con su bendito amor, Jesús destruyó mis tinieblas y transformó mi abatida alma en un jardín de luz. Machacó mis pecados y los mezcló con su sangre y misericordia. Con este bálsamo lazarino abonó la tierra estéril de mi ser. Con su dedo pulgar, remember the Bible is writing with his dedo. So here he's also doing that. Con su dedo pulgar hizo los surcos y con su palabra brotaron las plantas. La regaba con el vaho de su espíritu, que dio vida a un mar de flores, con la dulce fragancia de la paz. Cuando pensaba que había germinado toda la flora en mi oasis, Jesús sacó de su corazón una semilla de amor. So literally, Jesus takes out a seed of love from his heart. La plantó en el centro de mi Edén. What's her Edén? Her soul, right? That's the new garden. La plantó en el centro de mi Edén. Después sopló sobre ella y nació la flor más hermosa que mis ojos jamás han visto. Cuando la cortó estaba a punto de gritarle, Rabuni, ¿qué haces? Extendió su mano y me la obsequió diciendo, una flor para una flor. Dios ama mi alma. A flower for a flower. So, ese es el segundo. No, wait, just one more. Right? Miren, ese es más cortito. Aquí sí es, ahora sí es Santo Toribio. Allí habló Santo Toribio como, bueno, no, habló Kika en el primer poema, su hermana mayor. En el segundo poema habla una prostituta. ni le puse nombre. Podría ser cualquier prostituta. Aquí es un poema, pero es como una reflexión que es para él mismo, pero para todos nosotros. Eres un poema de Dios. You are a poem of God. Entonces, pero aquí está también como siendo como teólogo Santo Toribio, because he's reading the Genesis differently. No lo está leyendo literalmente. Dice, muchos leen el libro del Génesis literalmente. Creen que Dios creó el mundo en 7 días. Para mí, esta revelación no es una verdad empírica, empirical or scientific, sino teológica, que refleja su magnificencia y poder creador de una manera poética. En este caso, Dios es un poeta y nosotros sus poemas terrenales. So that's it. For here's kind of weird. Here comes a reflection, and now here comes a poem. Remember, this is for cada uno de nosotros. Eres inspiración divina de Dios, aliento bendito que sale de su boca, su poema ambulante en la tierra. No busques la aprobación de nadie, pues el Rey del universo te acepta tal y como eres. No tienes que intentar ser, porque ya eres su hermosa creación de amor. No dejes que el miedo te encadene. Baja los muros de tu orgullo. Vístete con la toga de la humildad. Deja que Jesús te lave los pies y se deleite en ti. Así podrás decir, yo creación, adoro a mi Creador. Nada o nadie, ni yo mismo, puede separarme de ti. Que mis versos resplandezcan la vida a los demás. Mi rima armonice su cuerpo, mente y alma. Y mis metáforas revelen la cara de Jesucristo. Atrévete a decirle a Dios Padre, con tu arte me enseñaste a amarte. Soy un poema de Dios. Thank you so much. Muchísimas gracias. Thank you.
Great. So, me and Margarita will be sitting here next to, I hope we can this show everything, Brian? Everything shows here?
Yeah. Let me kind of twist this one.
Then, I'm going to go ahead and use this. You can use that. And we're here for a few minutes before we open up to the people here. Just talk about what we just heard. But I'm going to turn it really over to Margarita because she actually has some really good questions. I just wanted to say that what I love about poetry is that it puts you in another plane of reality. And because language can do that. Language can be very real and direct and factual, and you're in the fact. Poetry takes you to dimensions. And I get that when I hear both of them. The dimensions of either imagination or dimensions of what the moment represents. Like for example, when Alejandro's giving these poems about things he sees, people he knows, and he's telling their stories. And description, he puts you in their world. And poems do that. And then when Juan's talking about the santo and the connection with the people, what I really love the way that it ends up being is, in fact, we are all poems. That's a very beautiful concept. So I just wanted to say that, how beautiful and powerful poetry is. It takes you to another place. You're kind of suspended in another world, and then you're back in the real world. So I'm gonna let Margarita ask the question she had. I'll interject if I need to, but it'd be really good more to hear from our two authors here. Okay? Sorry. There you go.
Thank you, Luis. Actually, the questions that I have somehow along the reading and commentary have been explained or answered. So there are a couple that I want to focus more on because it relates to them being poets and also the languages, the different languages that they use. So I'll focus on those two, and I'm sure you'll have questions on that. Regarding poets, we know the title of this event is Poets, Rememories, Community, and Saints. You spoke about saints, community, and the influence, and then Alejandro spoke about Rememories, right? I will ask that as poets and writers, or what some people consider as artistic, as activists, right? You create works that include multiple voices or reveal experiences, individual or share within a community. Is there a voice in Zapote Tree or Santo Toribio you wish for to stand out because you identified with much more than other voices? And why? How or why?
Thanks for the question. There's another poem that I didn't read that deals with, is this on?
Yeah.
With Native American people. It's called, its title is Matanzas Creek. And where I found this poem, and these people, Rhoda and I were cruising the wineries up in, now I don't drink, I stopped drinking when I was 60 years old. But nonetheless, we were in the wineries, right? We were with friends, they did buy some wines. But anyway, Matanzas Creek is a poem that deals with Native American people in the creek, which was named after them, or this incident, Matanzas Creek. And what they're doing is butchering their prey, what they killed, and they have children running around there and so forth. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful scene, right? And then there's a footnote to the end of the poem. The poem is relatively short, that says that, in a couple of years from now, et cetera, they would be found doing this by invaders from the east or invaders from Europe, et cetera, and identify with those people, who are sitting there just minding their own business, enjoying their families, and butchering food for them to eat. And I think all of the characters I present in this collection are those people. You talk about community, and they're part of my community. And the other poems that deal with people who have really bad troubles and so on, they're all part of my community. And I think that's part of the activism that we carry, that we use. We use, poetry, novels, short stories, essays to become. We are activists. Luis mentioned that in one of his essays. Maria Sobek, who's a prominent professor, studied that and has a whole series of essays about different writers, as activism. I can go on, but I'm going to stop right here. There was an article in the New York Times by a real famous professor of literature, and he asked the question, what is literary criticism? What does it do? Can it cope with these new writers that are coming into universities and so forth? And they're not coming just solely from the United States. They come from Latin America, Africa, other parts of the world, different languages, et cetera, et cetera. And he points out, and she points out, that literature isn't the literature 50 years ago or 100 years ago. It is different. It is being made different by these new voices that see the world in a very different way. So I identify with those ideas.
The question is, which voice do I identify the most with?
Yes.
Yes.
And why or how?
And why? I think honestly, it would have to be the dreamer, Nati, because I was also an undocumented, kid. I am from what we call ourselves the what's it called, the amnesty generation. We were lucky enough back then. Simpson Rodrigo, AB 2015, Amendment Bill AB 2015, didn't legalize us, but it gave us the right to receive financial aid. And I started at the community college, and then transferred. So is there a little of me and not definitely, because I agree with Alejandro. I personally believe that we are a body, a mind, and a soul, and being an activist, we do it in our writing, and sometimes we don't only are activists for the politics and the socioeconomic struggles of our community, but in a way we're also spiritual activists. Not trying to indoctrinate. This is the background is Catholicism, but it's a way, one way that this young kid, is a metaphor, soul searching. He's searching for something more than academics. Yes, it's important. What's going to give him, a steady income, but it's more than that, And so I identify with Nadi, with that voice. And there are other voices, Kika. There's another little boy that loses his mom, and he wants to be God. He wants to be God, and he wants his dad to die so he can keep his mom alive. So there are other voices there, but the one I identify with the most would have to be nothing.
Let me ask a question now, because the discussions today are about artificial intelligence, and then there's the fear that artificial intelligence will overcome everything. It'll be more powerful than humans and all this kind of thing. But one of the things that I'm very much convinced is poetry is really the proof that artificial intelligence will never be able to be human. And I think what you just pointed out, what you've been kind of saying, we are concerned with things that artificial intelligence can't be concerned about, because we're not just the mind, we are sensory, right? We're what we smell. Our memories have smell and hearing and everything connected to it. But we have a spirit. The spirit takes on a whole different, another aspect of who we are. And so memories are something that are not just what data goes into a computer and you remember data. Even if it's done artistically, it's not done like a human being. And I want to ask you guys, both of you, because I think in both your poetry, you're really touching on those areas about how to be human in a world that can be very cool, very impressive, and yet still hanging on to your humanity, your dignity, your spirit.
Honestly, I think this is why in our age, poetry is even more important than ever. I honestly believe it. It doesn't, feed us in a sense. It doesn't give me an income. Some many. For many of us, it doesn't. But what it does, it honestly feeds our soul. There's might be a cliche, but it is true. Te amo con todo mi corazón. Te amo con toda mi alma. I love you with all my heart. I love you with all my soul. That expression, that poetic expression, is telling you it's more than hormones. It's more than chemistry. We know the chemistry of sex, but it's more than sex. There's a deeper connection between human beings, and we give it a label. We give it a word. We call it love. And it's body. It is mind, but it's also the soul. It is something that you can only feel as a human being. And artificial intelligence might be able to be intellectually or in a cognizant way, supersede us. But in the actual feelings, en lo que es el corazón y el alma, I don't think that can be reproduced.
I agree with everything that's been said. Artificial intelligence can be very dangerous. Okay. Now there's a term, some of you probably have heard of it if you're computer science majors and so on. the whole idea of singularity. There's a theory, right, that we have created the last machine, and that is the computer. And the computer, because of the chip size, the smaller it gets, the more powerful it gets. And at the same time, we as people, and mainly people who control knowledge or the production of knowledge, right? And this is an example that we use that comes from the University of California and probably other universities, is that they send us a letter saying, please donate all of your writings, donate all of your research, et cetera, to the university so that they can house it in their computer so that everybody can have access to it. Well, I'm completely against that. You know, I don't want to give them my novels so that they can go ahead. You know, I want my novels to be read, you know, by people outside, my writing to be read outside. But they dump it in these massive computers that are not sentient. They will never be sentient, but they can't compute, you know, stories. They can compute literature. You know, even now the strikes by people in making movies and people, etc. They're saying, well, you know, computers are not sentient, but they could possibly take our jobs away, right? So that's the danger that I see. You know, and one last thing about the university. You know, the university has this tendency of believing that they're always right, and they're not. And the whole idea of mentoring people, they're cloning people. They want you to think exactly what you're being taught, right? And that's happening today. And that's also the problem. But yes, artificial intelligence is dangerous, but hopefully we can control it and not believe a lot of books like that say that, you know, we built the last machine. That's a bunch of baloney. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Your responses now take me to, coincidentally, my next question. Speaking of language, or how you decide to write or express more than writing. We listen to Spanish and English, a mixture, not Spanish, but hopefully next time. But I'll ask you, as bilingual, interlingual, or multilingual writers, could you comment on how you decided on the language in the format, whether prose or poetry? You wrote both of your books about the trip in Santo Toribio, and were your readers and the content that you wrote a decisive factor on that? Were you focusing on a reader or perhaps something else?
In this particular case, I think I start with an idea, you know, or with a person, or with an emotion, and then I let it grow. You know, I let it grow in my mind. I started with ¿por qué ser santo? You know, or I can't be a saint. You know, I can't, but I can be artistically. I can go in his mind, vicariously live in his soul, in his mind, or at least imagine it, and then create from there. And since this saint is, you know, Mexicano, I mean, the natural thing would be for him to speak Spanish. And that is the reason I wrote it in Spanish. There's no other reason. You know, if the character would be bilingual, maybe I would use Spanish. I haven't ventured there's only one poem that I've written entirely in English. You know, highly political. Is this my president? Yes, it's about Trump. It's against Trump. Anyway, that's the only one that I've written in English because I thought it merited. So to me, the situation or the character tells me that this is the language or languages that you're going to use. Whether I'm talking about the language English or Spanish, or even the words. You know, the words. Of course, here I have to make them sound like a priest. You know, I can't make him sound like about the loco because, he's from the Cristero War, right? Now, if I'm going to the barrio and there's a priest, homeless industries. And I'm thinking, there's another priest that is helping out, the creator of homeless industries. Then maybe I'll make them bilingual and to be able to connect with kids from the barrio, speak like kids from the barrio. So to me, the situation and the character tells me what kind of language I will be using.
I guess I could start with a crazy declaration, and that is the United States is a country that destroys foreign languages all the time. It's against foreign language. Right? It tries to kill them off, right? And it does that because I experienced that. It was when I went to the Vale Elementary School, that was the Mexican school for the Marwell Unified School District, right? I went to kindergarten. They had a teacher there that was hired was hired to transition us from Spanish to English. From that point on, I started to lose my vocabulary in Spanish. Right? So I kept, but of course at home we spoke Spanish a lot. People around us spoke Spanish, etc., etc. But slowly throughout the years, I lost a lot of my Spanish. Okay, I do not consider myself bilingual. Many people think that I'm bilingual. I'm not. I think it's very difficult to be bilingual. Either you have to be raised many, many years in Mexico to learn and dominate Spanish, and then come to the United States and also, study here and learn, and you will learn Spanish and English as well. Most young students think that they're bilingual because they can handle a little bit of Spanish. But if they're hired at a bank to ask them, some Argentino comes up and says, I want to do all of this, but he does all of this banking in Spanish. He doesn't have the vocabulary of that business or that process. So we lose a lot of vocabulary that we learn at home, in the kitchen, through listening to our parents, etc., etc. I consider myself interlingual, not bilingual, but interlingual, and that means that Spanish impacts my English. Through syntax, to the way I write sentences, etc., etc. All right, and the way I see the world. But I see the world through English, and I see it through Spanish. And I've written novels. My first 3 novels were all in Spanish, and they were published by Joaquin Ortiz in Mexico City. Right, so that's what I want to get across to young students. If you want to dominate Spanish, you got to really study it, travel in those countries, etc., etc., to be as proficient in Spanish as you are when you graduate the University of California in English. And so those are things that I think are really important. I myself, I start writing a novel, and it starts in Spanish, like you say, the character handles Spanish, then I will stay with Spanish. But I also like to mix languages. And I think that's beautiful to be able to tell stories in 2 languages, because Spanish views the world one way, English views the world another way.
Thank you, Alejandro. I just wanted to comment that I noticed I know some characters, some voices in Zapote Tree actually do speak Spanish.
Yes.
So you are true to their emotions or their expressions in the book as well. Please.
Well, maybe getting away a little bit from language, because that could be a whole discussion right now. But I am interested in, because you were talking about the migrant experience and the role of Santo Toribio as being a guide, kind of like a spiritual guide to their journey. And I think that it is true as far as migrants are concerned, that they're on a spiritual journey, whether it's Catholic or not, they're in that spiritual journey. Migrancy is a natural condition of humanity, but it's made worse when you have borders and militarization and you have discrimination. It's made where all these refugees around the world now, where they're suffering. To be a refugee now is to be poor and neglected and oppressed. It shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it's become. So I want you to speak a little bit on that, maybe you or the Heather too, about what's happened with the borders and nation states, especially if it's impacting Mexicanos who prior to the Spanish came with migrants all the time, migrating back and forth. Maybe you can comment on that spiritual journey connected to that.
Okay, very good. Well, I think migration is just a natural, what do you call it? In some of the countries in Latin America are really in bad shape. And if people want a better life for their kids, so they naturally take that chance and just go north, all the different ways that they possibly can, right? So, it is. We'll never stop migration coming to the United States. People want to come here from Europe, from all different parts. Even some middle-class people, Europeans, will come to the United States and live a life and they'll stay. Or the kids, they send kids here. Mexican families, some very wealthy families, send their kids to the best prepas in Mexico City, and they send them off to Yale because they can give a big donation to Yale, et cetera, or all the Ivies or all the prominent universities in the United States. So that is kind of almost a natural, for a wealthy family in Mexico, they send their kids to England or to the United States to study. One thing though, you mentioned the border. The border is very dangerous and it's very difficult to cross from the south to the north. But one of the things that most people see the future of the borderlands, what they call the U.S.-Mexican border region, is always a bleak, apocalyptic place in an apocalyptic future. I don't see it that way at all. I think there's so many things that we're and I like to read a lot about this and study this a lot, is what are happening to the border today, that are very positive. There's a lot of political people the governors or whatever in the border that don't recognize Mexico at all. They don't want any help from Mexico whatsoever. All right. But there's so much money going across the border, either, billions and billions of dollars are crossing the border all the time. Mexican money, North American money, et cetera, and the border's future, I think, is going to be a real positive one. A tremendous amount of investment in those regions. And one of the things that's happening is population growth. Demographics is going to change the way people see the border and the border region. The border region is 400 miles north of the U.S. border and 400 miles south of the U.S. border. Quickly, we have a lot of municipalities on the border being developed. And some of these municipalities are very big. Tijuana and San Diego. Another one would be, what is it? El Paso and Juarez, right? And the Tijuana San Diego municipality is a region of 2 million people, right? And where are those Mexican kids coming to school that live there on the other side of the border? They come to the United States to study, right? They have their mica for what is it? I don't know, 30 miles across the border that they can't go. But you go to Mexicali or whatever, and you see at around 3 o'clock all the buses coming in. Hundreds and hundreds of kids are coming back to home that live on the Mexican side. I see really, we can go on this, but I see positive things in the future. The demographic side of it is, if you look at the population of Latinos today in the United States, how many Latinos are there right now? The census. If you look at the census, how many Latinos, meaning all Latinos, right, are living in the United States right now? How much?
I don't know, but a lot. That's for sure, because LA is the most populated from Latinos, Mexicanos after Mexico City. It's a lot.
Right now, according to the census, there are 65 million Latinos in the United States. Okay, the census also predicts by the year 2050, there's going to be over 100 million Latinos living in the United States.
And that's only the ones that are in that choose to write down that they're Latino. Because some have been accustomed to put white as well. Right. So imagine they don't put white and they do put Latino.
Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a big difference. And a lot of the negative things that are happening right now is because that's what people fear, right? And by the year 2050 also, Anglo-Americans, don't get upset if I say this, will probably be a minority. So that's probably the worst threat that people fear. But yet I still see a really wonderful situation that will develop on that particular region. That 400 miles north, 400 miles south of the U.S.-Mexican border. U.S.-Mexico, region, border region. Anybody else?
I think it has both. It's a juxtaposition. I think they're two. Yes, we have the positive aspect of the border and things that we can say, okay, Tijuana, oh no. But if you go to Tijuana, the cultural life in Tijuana, you'll be surprised. Until you go visit, you think of Tijuana, this, border town. No, writers, painters. It's amazing when you go to their book fair. So yes, there's a positive aspect of the border, but we cannot, deny there's also the negative aspect of the border. People dying in the border, dying in the border because simply they don't have the proper documents, etc. So I think the border is this difficult space situation to define. We call it porous. We call it, for people that live in the border, it doesn't even exist. It consistently go back and forth to the point where it doesn't exist. Other people die in the border. Other people cannot cross the border and they make Mexico their home. The maquiladoras, we know they go to the south for a specific reason, cheap labor, and the turmoil of many women dying in the border, various reasons. But the border it's a fascinating but still dangerous place. But whoever is able to navigate the border, there are obviously a lot of opportunities. Alejandro mentioned the impact of numbers, even of the Spanish language. There are more Spanish speakers here in the US than in La Madre Patria. There are more Spanish speakers here than in España. I think there are maybe 2 or 3 Latin American countries have more Spanish speakers. I think it's Mexico, probably Colombia and Argentina. But in the future, I think if it goes that way, we're even going to surpass it. So yeah, there's some aspects that are very positive in the border, but those that are still negative, they're still there. And in fact, some of them have increased. I remember crossing the border. I'm not ashamed of saying my age. I am 57 years old. I crossed the border when I was shy of, or around 8. So I've been living in this country more than in the country of my origin, Mexico. And we took 5 tries, cross the border. Literally crossing the border. Era un alambre, estaba cortado. Ahí entramos 5 times. A child of 8 years old crossing the border in our present time, very dangerous. Practically impossible. My mother and my 2 brothers, we crossed the border with my mother. My dad was waiting for us on this side of, place in the church. Why? Because we mingle with the other people, and when we came out, we just got on the car and then come over. That I don't think can be done now. The border has a lot of agents or even military in some cases, to the point that it's not as easy to cross. But people that can go back and forth, oh my God, si tienes el dinero, some people that live in Tijuana, they come and get educated here in the US, and they go back. They get the best of the 2 worlds. If you're one of those that has the socioeconomic position to take advantage of the border, oh my God, the border's the best. You have the best of the 2 worlds. But the sad reality, that's not the case for many of our Centroamericanos and Mexicanos.
Just to add on your comments, you speak of the border and the migration north. There's also migration south. And I say it because of my age. Many people my age are retiring and going back, whether they're Anglo or Salvadorian, Mexican, and they choose to, and you say socioeconomic possibilities, they choose to live in that area that you mentioned, or even further south, Huatulco, Oaxaca, because they prefer to stay away from the political turmoil and everything else that a capitalist country brings. So there's also communities and beautiful places, of course, if there's that money. Yeah, but the possibilities of moving back, just you asked about a spiritual journey. That is part of the spiritual journey. Yes, you you get educated, you work on the fields or anywhere else that you can until you become who you want to be, hopefully, and then you're settled, and then you think of the other part of the spiritual journey. And many people are doing that as well. And I just remember my neighbors doing that. She was going to have her birthday party over the weekend. She said, no, I'm moving back to not Huatulco, but El Salvador. Come and visit me. Okay, I will. So there's that other migration that is very common nowadays.
I can add to that. One of the population in the United States that's going south for medical reasons is our older folks, like me, 79. Right. They're going to, what do you call it, casas de tercer vida,
right.
But they're really nice places. They're not just, no, they're very, very nice, and that's what's growing.
Because the healthcare here is crazy.
Yeah, and it's good healthcare. Yeah, it's good healthcare. They provide everything you need, et cetera, et cetera. And they're close enough to the United States if you need something to fly over, go to Houston, go to any of those border regions, places that you find, maybe your doctors there, your old doctors, and surgery would be better there, et cetera, et cetera. But that's one population that definitely, as we get older, is going south because they can't afford living here, right, and so forth. So, that's happening. The other thing that's happening, just a couple of examples, is look at Elon Musk. You probably heard that he's building a massive factory of cars, all electric cars that are a lot cheaper than that will sell for a much lower price than that a car what Tesla sells in the United States. And in the target are those type of countries. Mexican population. Mexico has about 133 million people right now. Everybody wants a car. Young people want cars. Well, this Tesla is going to be sold for $20,000 to $25,000, which probably that economy can buy. Those people, that population can buy. So there's a lot. And one last thing is, China and Taiwan has us all hooked up on because of chips, computer chips. China produces them. Taiwan is probably the country that produces the most in the world, the little tiny ones, right? And what's happening now is there are plans to build chip companies there in Mexico, right? And then they'll be sending them over here to the United States. We don't have to depend on those countries anymore for chips. We create our own chips. So anyway.
Well, I think we should probably maybe get some questions, but
yes.
Juan, do you want to say anything on this?
Look, let's not forget what the 1960s, what these writers also created. The way to empower the community was saying, look, no, we're not coming to a stranger. This is our land. We're peregrinos de Aztlán, Miguel Méndez. And we're coming back to our ancestry. This is our land. And so coming back, going away from Catholicism, this is the land of Aztlán. We're coming back to the land of our ancestors. That was another way that La Generación del Quinto Sol, these were writers, mentioned Anaya, Tomás Rivera, Alurista, I can go on. There's about, it depends who you ask, there's about 10 to 15 names, Estela Portillo Tremblay, who I studied, these are writers that established that mentality. No. We belong here. This is Aztlan, and we're coming back to the land of our ancestors. So it's another way of empowering the people that cross the border and say we're coming back to what used to be us, ours. Yeah. So just wanted to mention that real quick.
And let me just add that also Mexico. In Guadalajara went to Chicano Fest, huge, because so many Chicanos have been deported over the last 20, 30 years that now it's part of the culture. And I went to 200 low-rented cars. But all the cultura we see in LA is now, but it's all over Mexico, but Guadalajara had a big, because we have a lot of people, Jalisco here. So I want to mention it's going back and forth, even the deportees are claiming Mexico now. They grew up here, they didn't speak good Spanish, but now they're over there, and now the culture is being embraced somewhat, not totally, but it's starting to change. So some of these fronteras are starting to fall down in ways that we didn't always expect.
Yeah, it did. And that's what's called transnationalism, right? Transnationalism. A lot of people have families in Central America and even so forth. They go back, and they keep sending money. They send money back there, and those communities are being developed and so forth. That's one way, by sending money. Another way is by sending culture. But culture is also another part of transnationalism, right? People go send money to Haiti to build, and Haiti's in terrible shape right now, to build hospitals, to build, because of what's going on. Same thing is happening. So transnationalism has become more and more and more important. But at the same time, transnationalism is opening the border, expanding the borders, and creating good things on both sides of the border.
I want to take this opportunity to mention Alejandro's next book, The Place of the White Heron, because of Aztlan you mentioned, and that, without saying a lot, that has, at least for my introduction, the vision of Aztlan not as a foreign place, but as a home in which, or to and from which, Mexicanos, Chicanos just go back and forth. And the place is there. And there's actually, of course, now there's a border, but there's that ideology of it being an open place. And the border, of course, is modern, but not in the ideology of Aztlan.
I just want to say something about I want to recognize Margarita for being one of the best editors that I've worked with.
Thank you.
Really, yeah. She is wonderful. I mean, I've worked with other editors, and another woman editor, right? Her name is Penn, and Carol Penn, and she edited also two of my books that I read, that I wrote, and these got readings, but both those books got published. And then now Margarita is working with me, and hopefully she'll be, working. She worked on this book, and then I have another one that's come that is almost done. I think by the end of this summer, I hopefully have a first draft of it. But yet, I want to thank you so much to helping me.
It's been a joy.
And I want to mention that these books, including these books that are here, are available to Tia Chucha's /bookstore. Anybody can order it. We have a great virtual bookstore. Plus, you can always come here and visit our great bookstore. So any of these authors can be obtained there. So I think we should open it up.
Yes, definitely.
And I think we have a few people here. If anybody has any questions or comments they want to make, say it as loud as you can so hopefully everybody can hear.
Yeah.
We have a mic. We can just share.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I can give you the mic.
Okay. And then we can.
You can.
Okay, hello. I just want to say thank you. I really did appreciate hearing all the conversations y'all were having, and I really wanted to butt in so many times. But it was really nice hearing all of y'all talk to each other and discuss your perspectives, even if they differed. I also agree, I do not like borders. I think that there shouldn't be borders, especially because you mentioned Aztlan and everything, and this is native land and it was stolen, and it's important to like have that reclamation back. But other than that, away from those conversations and back to the books, Alejandro, your poem made me cry. Your poem made me cry. It touched me a lot. I adore my mom. Mi mama's in Michoacan. You know, she's very comforting and nurturing, but also very stern and firm. So in the beginning of your poem, when you were saying how you wanted to cuddle her and everything, pero te dijo como ponte quieto, algo así, you know. It reminded me of my mom because I would want to cuddle her too, and she'd be like, "Ay, me estoy sofocando, like I can't breathe," like, you know. But then she'd be like, still cuddling me, putting me to sleep, and it's just that beautiful like experience that we have with our Latina moms, you know. I also appreciate that you mentioned Toni Morrison and that, you know, you were talking about La Virgen, you know, like just women, like female figures, and I appreciate that so much. And how the story of the painter, how he like reclaimed his autonomy too, through, you know, like saying, like through his flawed body, like he was just like, I don't care what you think about me because I reclaim that, you know. So reclamation there too. I also related to the mother lost her green card part because my mom, I grew up with seeing her go to Bell High, learn more English. She would go to her immigration classes también and at Bell Gardens Ford Park, and it was just really nice. So I resonated a lot with your poems, and I want to learn more about your book, so I'm gonna write that.
I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
Did you grow up in Bell Gardens?
I grew up in Cudahy.
Okay.
So.
My wife taught at Suva Elementary School.
Oh yeah, Suva, that's so cool. That's awesome. Yes, I'm very familiar with Suva, but that's amazing. I love hearing people are from Southeast LA area, you know. But for Luis, it's like Juan. I apologize. You also made me cry. I don't know if I'm just a big crybaby, but
Y eso que no leí de mi mamá, ¿eh? There's one that
no le hice a tu mamá, pero de todos modos, like la parte donde the dreamer, you said que a veces nos tragamos las palabras porque reconocemos los esfuerzos de nuestros padres, you know, like we know that we have so much to say, but I resonate with that too because I eat my words all the time because I recognize all the esfuerzos of my dad, my mom, and sometimes I just look at it from a different perspective. Instead of just like I challenge them in the parts that I know need to be challenged. And then there's the parts where I'm like, you know what, Lisa, just stop. Just be the kid right now. Just be the child that you are, you know, and listen to your parents. And I don't know, I also love the like spiritual aspect that you included. I think that although we hold Catholicism accountable, some of us, it's still very important in my life and in many Latinos' lives, especially los Mexicanos, you know. I love like Catholicism and all that, so like in a way I feel like this book, because I have not read it, but I will read it because you had me over here all emotional. I thought it was beautiful cuando dijiste que I am a poem of God.
Yep.
And that was beautiful, and like it is a poema de reflexión, and I feel like, again, although you didn't speak about your mother, this reminded me so much of my mom, and my mom means a lot to me. My mom is everything, like, you know, yeah, but thank you for...
Now I have a question for you.
Okay.
When is your book coming out?
What is it?
Yeah. I mean,
When is my mom's book coming out?
Oh, yeah, or your book.
Mi mamá es poeta también.
Wow, sí.
So, yo crecí con mi mamá como escribiendo all day, and she has notebooks like front and back, and I'm sorry.
That's okay. I identify with you totally. My mom passed, and for every occasion, birthday, Christmas, or just a gathering, family gathering, we had tons of them, she had a poem.
Mm-hmm.
She would be in her room, and we knew what she was doing, we siblings. And then time came, and she made us all laugh and cry, and there was always a poem at home for every occasion. So we, my sister and I, somehow have inherited those, and as I have put in digitally, I'm answering my mother. I don't know what you're doing with your mom's poems, but I am having a dialogue with my mom as well in poetic form.
Yeah.
So, what is your name?
Lisette.
Lisette.
Como
Lisette. Gracias, Lisette.
Gracias.
Yeah, and you know the reason why we have Tia Chucha is because she was a poet. She
That's
played
awesome.
guitar. And she did art and paint. In other words, our people resisted with art in their own way. And your mom resisted her own way. Whatever the world has clamped down on her, poetry is liberating, and that's what we do, you know. And so I really appreciate that about your mother.
I appreciate it from you guys. Thank you so much.
Actually, this book is dedicated to my mom.
Aw.
Por su edificante, inquebrantable y desafiante amor. Dedico este poemario a mi madre, Consuelo Núñez de Casillas. I call her Michelito. Yeah. So I believe it, yes. But those poets that we have at home, there's some harsh poems too.
Yeah.
I mean, believe me, my mom she can be very lovely, but she can be also very abrasive. Well, I'll stop there because some of the things that she would tell me, pretty strong. Yeah.
Well, let me just add, because I think this is a good point. And I don't want to knock down my dad, they're both dead, my parents. But my mom was Tarahumara from Chihuahua. But she couldn't be Tarahumara. She grew up Catholic. Her language was gone. She grew up in the barrio, the ghetto called La Tarahumara in Chihuahua City. De-Indianized Tarahumaras. But one of the things that was really sad is my dad, who's kind of mixture, Indígena, a little bit of Africa, of course, Spanish. He refused my mom to ever talk about Tarahumara, ever say anything, to ever do any healing, because her and my tío, they knew the healing arts. He refused it, and then he wouldn't let her sing. That is the oppression that I'm talking about. And so my mom, I think, just kind of had to hide everything, but she would always tell us, and especially because I'm the only one that paid attention. My brothers and sisters didn't seem to care. Somos Tarahumaras. She would always emphasize it, so we don't lose that part of us. We don't forget even with everything else going on. So I just want to honor the mothers that brought us
Yes.
here.
Thank you so much. We're honoring our moms.
Yeah.
And our seeing, como dice mi madre, every person on this earth has a mom. Aunque toda la gente, not toda la gente, pero someone comes from a female figure.
Yeah.
So.
And Mother Earth, we always have a mother. Any more? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Skylar. I'm part of the Theo Tucha staff here. I was recently hired as a bookstore assistant. Really happy to have you guys here. I love hearing about poetry. I consider myself a little bit of a poet. I love writing poetry for school and even on my free time. So I'm really ecstatic to be here and listen. But I just have a few comments and 2 questions. So one comment is that the poem that you wrote about the shooter, Mr. Morales, it really resonated with me because I didn't grow up in Santa Clarita, but I live in Santa Clarita, and I don't know if anyone here is familiar with it, but there was the Saga shooting in Santa Clarita. So I think that happened my freshman year, and the school that I went to was only about maybe 5 minutes away, 5 to 10 minutes away, give or take the traffic and the stop signs and everything, the lights. But I remember just the day of the Saga shooting, I think I was in my English class at 7:45 a.m. and I was really drowsy, and then I remember writing something on my computer, and my teacher just tells everyone to crouch down, and then she goes and she turns off the lights, and then she gets the fixtures for the the windows and everything, and we're all freaking out. She tells everybody to not use their phones. She's like, everybody just be quiet. And we had never experienced gun violence in Santa Clarita, so we were kind of like, okay, well, what is this about? Like, is there does somebody have like drugs here? Like, what's happening? So then we're all like checking our phones and everything, and we see that there's a shooter at Saugus. And then everybody was going crazy because in Santa Clarita, it's a very tight-knit community. So whoever is at a high school, somebody at another high school knows. And I had about like 3 or 4 friends that went to Saugus, including like my childhood best friend. So I was really worried for her. And then it turned out that like at least 2 kids had died, or the 2 kids had died, Gracie and Dominic. And there was one girl, her name was Addison Kegley, and this is the part that really resonated with me, the part where you said the shooter held his gun to his heart. Addison Kegley was shot in the chest. And I remember the story so poignantly because her teacher had to hold a maxi pad to her chest to try to stop the bleeding. So I kind of made that connection there in my mind. But my question to you is it's not really as a survivor of gun violence or anything, but like just a question from a literature standpoint. Why make your poem follow the narrative or the story of the shooter? Because I've seen a lot of poetry, and I've even written poetry about the story following the narrative of the victim or their survivor, but why did you make the conscious choice to kind of switch it and present this to the world?
Well, I guess, I think in the title there's see something, say something, and that's one of the reasons, because some people know that other folks are giving their kids guns, etc. You hear that in the news all the time, and yet those people don't know how to use guns. To fire, a rifle or to fire a handgun, you really have to know how to hold it. You have to know, and so forth. And that is, number one, we shouldn't be giving our kids guns, as far as I'm concerned. But I think that has to be told, especially from the point of view of this professor. The question is, did he say something or not say something? We always have to be not afraid to report things to the police or to call the police and so in that situation. That's one of the reasons why I pointed out. And it also is the tragedy of that, having a young kid, and you felt, it ends with, and he goes away feeling confident. That to me, it tells me that there's something wrong with him psychologically or whatever. He needs a gun to feel to have some confidence.
I definitely can draw like parallels between like the Saugus shooter, and I don't really want to go too into detail about that because it's still it hurts. It still hurts, Like I didn't even know Grace or Dominic, but I miss them. Like I feel like I miss them. I didn't even know these kids, but they were my age, and like just following their accounts on Instagram, being like, oh, Grace would have graduated today, Dominic would have graduated today. It's just something so like. It's hard and traumatic to encounter, but then when I hear poetry like yours, it kind of makes me feel better in a way, because at least I know that there are people out there who care enough to put it in literature, to put it in writing, so that the people of the future can read this and be like, okay, well, if I see something, then I'll say something, or even like the kids of today can read that and be like, okay, then at least I know that I have a voice and I can make it heard, and just kind of like killing off an author, because if I get too much into it, I think
that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
If you see something, you should say something. And that goes for all the politicians. I mean, they're seeing all these massacres that are occurring, every other day, every single day, people are dying because of gun violence. Frankly, I'll be honest with you, I'm the type of person who sees guns, there's some need for guns, okay? But you have to pay for them. I believe that what we should do is pass a law in the state of California that if you're going to own guns, you have to treat them like cars. You have to pay for them every single year for ownership. Make sure they're good, they're good quality or taken care of well. You should put them away in a safe, etc., etc. If you want to use rifles for hunting or for other, shooting or athletic rifles, like in the Olympics, they use rifles to shoot down. Those are going to cost you a lot more money. If you want to use those automatic weapons, they're going to cost you a lot of money. It should, at least they can do that. They should do something like that, rather than not doing anything at all. And I'm not talking about Democrats or Republicans. I'm talking about all those politicians.
One of the things that people may not be aware, because we're talking about mass shootings all the time now, and we've had mass shootings close by. You're talking about the Saugus, which is only 15, 20 minutes from here. the Simi Valley shooting, the Borderline Bar, that's only half an hour from here. Monterey Park, where I live, is not that far away. We've had mass shootings right here, but people forget that LA County, the big county, from 1980 to the year 2000, 15,000 people lost their lives with gun violence. This has been a violent place. It was violent when I was growing up. And the sad thing about it is, I get what you're saying when you say you don't even know them, but you still care for them, everything. But even me in the late 60s, I lost 25 friends. People, it wasn't a mass shooting. It was little dying by, we were in gang warfare. Gang warfare was popping up. In other words, we don't realize, right now it's all the mass shootings, which I get it. But this has been very a problem in our communities for a long time. And when it was our communities, nobody gave a hoot, except more prisons and put everybody away. Nobody was talking about it. Now it's being talked about because it's not just our communities anymore. Everybody's become gangster. And everybody's got access to guns. And I agree with Alejandro. We have to keep track of this. Nobody's saying people shouldn't have guns. I think the thing is the responsibility to register, to make sure who's got them, to make sure that people know how to use them, to make sure that it's not accessible, especially the kind of guns that started happening during the 80s and 90s that have no purpose other than mass murder. Machine guns, semi-automatics, and AR-15s, and all kinds of things. In other words, there's no purpose for them other than just mass killing. So I think this is a very important topic, and I appreciate you raising it because it is painful when you're losing people and they're in your community. But we've been dealing with this for a long time, but we've been telling people we can address this, and that they won't do it, especially the Republicans. They don't want to address any of it. They want to get, they want to go against drag shows. They want to go against LGBTQ. They want to go against race issues in books. They don't want to get these guns registered and make sure that everybody's responsible. It's just a great issue for people.
Yeah, another point, I just have this point and then an additional point, but another point I have is the poem that you wrote about Rico and the woman, the Latino woman in the world and how they contribute to society. I just want to say that I had an aunt, she died of colon cancer, but she's still my idol, I still love her. But it was so interesting because when she immigrated here from Nayarit, she was, I think, about maybe 15 or 16, and she was stuck taking care of my mom and her aunt, or her sister, so my aunt. And I remember my mom told me one time, and my aunt, my tia Bertha, was a very prideful woman. She would never ever kind of disclose the fact that she was fearful of stuff unless you kind of saw it in her face. But my mom told me that one time she was coming off of the closing shift at a Subway in Van Nuys, and she had a knife pulled on her. Some guy just came up to her and he just saw that she was this lone Latin woman, and closing off the shift at Subway, was probably really tired and about to get on the bus, and he pulled a knife on her, and my mom told me that she came home and she was so terrified and that she just didn't know what to do. And I just feel that really resonated with me because it's this woman is working her butt off to help support Subway, which is a big corporation making money off of the work of Latina women, off of the work of Latinas like my aunt. And yet she had to go and carry the cross of violence and the burden of trying to get home after a closing shift. So I just want to say that I appreciated that, and I appreciate your message. And one day when I go to Mexico, I think I'm going to print that message out and maybe put it on her grave just to make sure that she's appreciated in the afterlife. But yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to say. And then for you, Mr. Juan, I have another question, because I myself was a community college student. I went to community college out at College of the Canyon, so I myself love community colleges. I think that everybody should have access to them, or at least should go toward them or whatever. But my question to you is, why poetry? When did you get into poetry, and how did that kind of serve you as a person, as a human being, as a literature fanatic?
Wow, that's a good question. I was a pre-med student, and I took one course in college, Introduction to Literary Criticism, and I got to read some of the poetry there, and I got hooked. Honestly, it was that. And after that class, I knew I had to, but again, I was a migrant kid. We used to migrate to the state of Washington twice a year. And so I knew that I didn't want to be the starving artist. I knew I needed education. So I went the long route. I went to community colleges, College of the Sequoias, COS, in Visalia, California. And the reason I went was because AB 2050 that would allow undocumented students to get financial aid. I went to that's the only place that took me, but it was the best place for me, a community college. It's one of the best, I think, educational systems in the world. It'll give you a second, third, or fourth chance. You don't have to have SATs or all this stuff. You can enter the community college. And so when I took that class, I know, no, this feels right. I know I want to do this.